Welcome to SI Audiobooks. Please like, share and subscribe for more content. Act 1, Scene 1, The Ghost Appears. Summary. The play opens on a cold, dark night at Elsinore Castle in Denmark. Francisco, a watchman, is on duty when Bernardo, another guard, arrives to relieve him. They exchange brief words, emphasizing the eerie atmosphere. Francisco leaves, and soon after, Marcellus, another guard, arrives with Horatio, Prince Hamlet's close friend and a scholar. Bernardo and Marcellus have brought Horatio to witness a ghost they claim to have seen on previous nights. Horatio is skeptical, dismissing their claims as mere imagination. However, as they speak, the ghost of King Hamlet suddenly appears, dressed in full armor. The men are struck with fear and awe. Horatio, gathering his courage, attempts to speak to the spirit. "What art thou that usurpst this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form, in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march?" 1.1.4649. The ghost does not respond and vanishes. Horatio is now convinced that the apparition resembles the deceased King Hamlet and believes it is an ominous sign. He recalls the story of Julius Caesar's assassination, when supernatural omens foretold doom. The guards discuss the political situation. The current king, Claudius, has taken the throne after King Hamlet's sudden death. Meanwhile, Prince Fortinbras of Norway seeks to reclaim lands that his father lost to King Hamlet in battle. The ghost appears once more but vanishes again when a rooster crows, signaling dawn. Horatio suggests that they inform Prince Hamlet of the ghost's presence, believing that if the spirit is truly the late king, it may choose to speak to his son. Analysis and notes. Opening atmosphere and themes. The scene immediately establishes a mood of mystery, tension, and foreboding. The cold, dark setting and the supernatural element of the ghost set the stage for a tragedy. The presence of the ghost introduces the theme of the supernatural, as well as the question of fate and the afterlife. Does the ghost return for revenge, unfinished business, or a warning? Horatio is the rational mind. Horatio's skepticism at first represents the voice of reason. However, his eventual belief in the ghost suggests that something unnatural is happening in Denmark. His reference to Julius Caesar's ghostly omens foreshadows the chaos and downfall that will follow in Denmark. Political context. Denmark on edge. The conversation about Fortinbras reveals a backdrop of political instability. The theme of war and power struggles is introduced early. The mention of King Hamlet's military triumphs contrasts with the current uncertain leadership of Claudius. Symbolism of the ghost. The ghost serves as a symbol of unresolved issues and disturbance in the natural order. Its presence hints at the play's central theme: something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Foreshadowing. The guard's fear, Horatio's historical comparisons, and the ghost's silence all foreshadow the coming tragedy. The rooster's crow signaling dawn aligns with folklore that ghosts disappear at daybreak, reinforcing the connection between the supernatural and the natural order. Act 1, Scene 2, Claudius' Court and Hamlet's Grief. Summary. The scene shifts from the eerie battlements to the royal court inside Elsinore Castle. King Claudius, who has recently taken the throne, addresses the Danish court. He acknowledges the recent death of his brother, King Hamlet, but insists that Denmark must move forward. To secure the throne, he has married Queen Gertrude, the late king's widow. Claudius balances grief with celebration, stating, "Though yet of Hamlet our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it is befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. Yet so far hath discretion fought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves." 1.2.17. He shifts quickly to state matters of state. Young Prince Fortinbras of Norway is preparing to attack Denmark to reclaim lands lost by his father. Claudius sends ambassadors to Fortinbras, uncle, the King of Norway, to prevent conflict. Next, Laertes, son of Polonius Claudius, chief advisor, requests permission to return to France. Claudius grants it. However, when Prince Hamlet is called forward, the mood shifts. Hamlet's grief and first soliloquy. Claudius addresses Hamlet, noting that he is still mourning his father's death. The king criticizes excessive mourning. "But you must know your father lost a father. That father lost his, and the survivor bound In filial obligation for some term. To do obsequious sorrow, but to persevere. In obstinate condolement as a course. Of impious stubbornness, 'tis unmanly grief. 1.2.8994. Claudius urges Hamlet to see him as a father, but Hamlet remains cold. When Claudius and Gertrude exit, Hamlet reveals his true emotions in his first soliloquy. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. 1.2.129-130. He laments that suicide is forbidden by religion. He condemns his mother for remarrying so quickly, expressing disgust at her relationship with Claudius. Frailty, thy name is woman. 1.2.146. He compares his father, King Hamlet, to a god, while likening Claudius to a satyr. He cannot understand how Gertrude, who once seemed devoted to King Hamlet, could move on so fast. Horatio and the Ghost's News. Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo arrive. Horatio, a loyal friend, tells Hamlet about the ghost's appearance. Hamlet is stunned and resolves to see it that night. If it assume my noble father's person, I'll speak to it, though hell itself should gape, and bid me hold my peace. 1.2.244-246. The scene ends with Hamlet growing suspicious and determined to uncover the truth. Analysis and notes. 1. Claudius is a politician. Claudius presents himself as a capable and diplomatic king, balancing grief and stability. His marriage to Gertrude strengthens his claim to the throne but raises moral questions. His words about mourning sound reasonable but are also manipulative. He wants Hamlet to stop grieving and accept him as king. 2. Hamlet's isolation and grief. Hamlet is the only one still deeply mourning his father. Everyone else has moved on, making him feel alienated. His first soliloquy introduces his melancholy, suicidal thoughts, and his resentment toward Gertrude. His disgust at Claudius and Gertrude's marriage foreshadows his obsession with corruption and betrayal. 3. Theme of appearance versus reality. Claudius appears to be a wise ruler, but Hamlet suspects something is wrong. Gertrude appears happy, but Hamlet questions her morality. The ghost's appearance challenges the idea that King Hamlet's death was natural. 4. The role of Horatio. Horatio represents trust and intellect. Hamlet trusts him above all others. By informing Hamlet about the ghost, Horatio sets the plot into motion. Act 1, Scene 3, Laertes, Ophelia, and Polonius on love and duty. Summary. The scene takes place at Polonius' house, where his son Laertes prepares to leave for France. Before departing, Laertes warns his sister, Ophelia, about her relationship with Prince Hamlet. He tells her not to take Hamlet's love seriously because, as a prince, Hamlet's choices in marriage are dictated by political necessity, not personal desire. For Hamlet, and the trifling of his favor. Hold it a fashion and a toy in blood. A violet in the youth of primy nature. Forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting. The perfume and suppliance of a minute. No more. 1.3.610. He warns Ophelia that Hamlet's affections may not be genuine and that she must guard her virtue. Ophelia pushes back slightly, saying Laertes should also follow his own advice when he goes to France. Polonius, lecture to Ophelia. As Laertes leaves, their father, Polonius, enters. He gives Laertes a series of fatherly warnings about how to behave abroad. Give thy thoughts no tongue, think before you speak. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice, listen more than you talk. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, don't lend or borrow money. This above all, to thine own self be true, stay true to yourself. Once Laertes leaves, Polonius turns to Ophelia and demands to know what Laertes was talking about. When Ophelia says they discussed Hamlet, Polonius immediately dismisses Hamlet's love as meaningless and deceptive. When the blood burns, how prodigal the soul. Lends the tongue vows. 1.3.116-117. Polonius is convinced that Hamlet is only toying with Ophelia and commands her to avoid him entirely. She dutifully agrees. I shall obey, my lord. 1.3.136. Analysis and notes. 1. Laertes is a protective brother. Laertes plays the role of a caring yet hypocritical brother. He warns Ophelia about Hamlet's affections but seems to have no issue pursuing his own pleasures in France. His warning emphasizes a double standard: women must remain pure, but men have more freedom. 2. Polonius is a controlling father. Polonius, lecture to Laertes, presents him as wise and authoritative, but his treatment of Ophelia shows his manipulative and dismissive nature. He treats Ophelia as naive and inexperienced, assuming she cannot make decisions for herself. His focus on social reputation rather than Ophelia's feelings reflects his concern for power over love. 3. Theme: love versus duty. Ophelia is caught between Hamlet's love and her duty to her family. The men in her life, Laertes, Polonius, and later Hamlet, dictate her choices, showing how women in the play have little control over their own fate. 4. Theme: appearance versus reality. Polonius assumes Hamlet is pretending to love Ophelia, but is he correct? This theme continues throughout the play as Hamlet's true intentions toward Ophelia remain unclear. Act 1, Scene 4, Hamlet meets the ghost. Summary: the scene takes place on the battlements of Elsinore Castle at midnight. Hamlet arrives with Horatio and Marcellus, waiting for the ghost to reappear. In the background, loud festivities are heard. King Claudius is drinking and celebrating. Hamlet criticizes this Danish custom of heavy drinking, calling it a national embarrassment. This heavy-headed revel east and west makes us traduced and taxed of other nations. They clep us drunkards. 1.4.1719. Suddenly, the ghost of King Hamlet appears. It gestures for Hamlet to follow, but Horatio and Marcellus try to stop him, fearing it may be an evil spirit leading him to danger. What if it tempt you toward the flood, my lord? Or to the dreadful summit of the cliff that beetles o'er his base into the sea, and there assume some other horrible form, which might deprive your sovereignty of reason, and draw you into madness. 1.4.6974. Hamlet, however, is fearless and determined. He declares that he does not fear death and follows the ghost into the night. Horatio and Marcellus, worried about Hamlet's safety, decide to follow at a distance. Analysis and notes. 1. Hamlet's distrust of Claudius. Hamlet's disgust at Claudius' drunken celebrations contrasts with his father's noble legacy. This scene further alienates Hamlet from the court, showing his resentment toward the new king. 2. Theme: fate and the supernatural. The ghost's appearance reinforces the theme of fate. Is Hamlet destined to uncover a dark truth? Horatio fears it may be a demonic spirit, introducing the question of whether supernatural forces are trustworthy. 3. Hamlet's courage versus recklessness. Hamlet's willingness to follow the ghost shows his bravery, but also his impulsiveness. Horatio's warning about madness foreshadows Hamlet's later struggles with sanity. 4. Theme: corruption in Denmark. The contrast between Claudius' celebration and the ghost's ominous presence symbolizes that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Act 1, Scene 5, the ghost's revelation and Hamlet's oath. Summary: Hamlet follows the ghost to a secluded place, where it finally speaks. The ghost reveals that it is the spirit of King Hamlet, doomed to walk the earth at night and suffer in purgatory by day because he died without the chance to confess his sins. He then drops a shocking revelation: his death was not natural. Contrary to the official story that he died from a snake bite, King Hamlet tells his son that he was murdered by Claudius. The serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. 1.5.3940. The ghost explains that while he was sleeping in his orchard, Claudius poured poison, henbane, into his ear, causing a gruesome death. He describes Claudius as a vile, incestuous, and corrupt man, accusing him of seducing Queen Gertrude before his death. However, he orders Hamlet not to harm Gertrude, saying she must be left to her own conscience and divine judgment. Taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge, to prick and sting her. 1.5.8588. The ghost then vanishes, leaving Hamlet overwhelmed with rage and grief. Hamlet's sworn revenge. Hamlet immediately swears to avenge his father, declaring, "O most pernicious woman, O villain, villain, smiling, damned villain, that one may smile, and be a villain." 1.5.105107. He resolves to erase all previous thoughts from his mind, focusing only on revenge. From the table of my memory. I'll wipe away all trivial fond records. 1.5.99-100. Horatio and Marcellus arrive. Horatio and Marcellus catch up to Hamlet, asking what happened. Hamlet refuses to tell them everything but makes them swear an oath of secrecy. The ghost's voice echoes underground, commanding them to swear. Frightened, they comply. As the scene ends, Hamlet ominously remarks that he may need to pretend to be mad as part of his plan. As I perchance hereafter shall think meet. To put an antic disposition on. 1.5.171-172. Analysis and notes. 1. The ghost is a catalyst for the plot. The ghost's revelation confirms Hamlet's suspicions about Claudius. However, the ghost remains ambiguous. Is it a true spirit or a demon trying to manipulate Hamlet? 2. Theme: revenge versus morality. Hamlet immediately swears revenge, but the ethics of revenge become a central struggle throughout the play. Unlike Claudius' direct murder, Hamlet's revenge will be complicated and uncertain. 3. Gertrude's role. The ghost does not accuse Gertrude of murder, only moral weakness. Hamlet, however, begins to resent her as much as Claudius. 4. Theme: madness real or feigned. Hamlet hints at pretending to be mad antic disposition, but will he control it, or will it consume him? 5. The oath scene: loyalty versus fear. Horatio and Marcellus are forced to swear secrecy, showing how Hamlet is now isolated in his quest. Act 2, Scene 1, Polonius spying and Ophelia's fear. Summary. The scene takes place at Polonius' house. Polonius sends his servant, Reynaldo, to spy on Laertes in France. Instead of simply checking on his well-being, Polonius instructs Reynaldo to spread false rumors about Laertes such as gambling or drinking to see if others confirm or deny them. This reveals Polonius' manipulative and distrustful nature. Shortly after, Ophelia enters in distress. She tells Polonius that Hamlet has just visited her, acting strangely, his clothes disheveled, his face pale, and his body trembling. He grabbed her wrist and stared at her but said nothing before sighing and leaving. Polonius immediately assumes that Hamlet is mad with love because Ophelia has obeyed him and rejected Hamlet's advances. He decides to inform King Claudius of Hamlet's behavior, believing that it may explain his growing madness. Analysis and notes. 1. Polonius is a master manipulator. He spies on his own son, proving he is untrustworthy and values control over honesty. His use of deception foreshadows the theme of espionage in the play: spying, surveillance, deceit. 2. Ophelia's powerlessness. Ophelia is caught between her father and Hamlet. Polonius assumes Hamlet is lovesick, but doesn't consider other explanations, such as political stress or grief. 3. Hamlet's behavior: madness or strategy. Hamlet's silent visit to Ophelia is bizarre. Is this part of his antic disposition, pretended madness? His physical state, pale, shaking, could suggest real emotional distress. His sigh at the end suggests pain or regret. 4. Theme: spying and deception. This scene introduces the idea that everyone is watching and manipulating each other, leading to misinterpretations and tragic consequences. Act 2, Scene 2, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive. Hamlet's soliloquy. Summary. The scene takes place in King Claudius' court. Claudius is concerned about Hamlet's recent erratic behavior and seeks an explanation. To get to the bottom of it, he sends for two of Hamlet's childhood friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He asks them to spy on Hamlet and discover the cause of his madness, particularly because they are close to him and might gain his trust. Claudius assures them that they will be well compensated for their efforts. So oft it chances in particular men, that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin, by the o'ergrowth of some complexion, oft breaking down the pales and forts of reason, or by some habit that too much o'erleavens, the form of plausive manners, that these men, carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect, being nature's livery, or fortune's star, their virtues else, be they as pure as grace, as infinite as man may undergo, shall in the general censure take corruption, from that particular fault, the dram of evil, doth all the noble substance of a doubt, to his own scandal. 2.2.821. He describes Hamlet's madness as being possibly due to an inner flaw or mole of nature, and emphasizes that this does not make Hamlet entirely guilty or inherently evil. Polonius, theory of Hamlet's madness. Polonius enters and proudly presents his theory that Hamlet's madness is due to his love for Ophelia. He suggests that Hamlet's distress over Ophelia's rejection has driven him to madness. He plans to send Ophelia to speak with Hamlet and observe him closely to confirm his theory. Claudius agrees, allowing Polonius to put his plan into action. Hamlet's interaction with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive and begin to speak with Hamlet. They try to be friendly, but Hamlet quickly sees through their motives and realizes that they were sent by the king and queen. He sarcastically asks them about the state of Denmark, remarking on how it seems like a prison. His famous speech on human nature follows, in which he expresses his disillusionment with life. What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason! How infinite in faculty! In form and moving how express and admirable! In action how like an angel! In apprehension how like a god! The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals! And yet, to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me, no, nor woman neither. Though by your smiling you seem to say so. 2.2.303309. He goes on to express that, despite all of humanity's supposed nobility and beauty, life is ultimately meaningless and filled with suffering. His disillusionment is clear, and he contrasts his lofty ideals of human potential with the emptiness he feels. The arrival of the players. A group of actors referred to as players arrives in Elsinore. Hamlet is delighted and immediately plans to ask them to perform a play, hoping it will reveal the truth about his father's murder. He speaks excitedly about their arrival and decides to use the play as a test to see how Claudius reacts, believing that a guilty conscience will manifest through the king's response to the play. He tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, "I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father. Before mine uncle, I'll observe his looks. I'll tent him to the quick. If he do blench, I know my course." 2.2.532536. Hamlet's soliloquy. What a piece of work is man! In a key soliloquy, Hamlet expresses his disillusionment with humanity. Though human beings have potential for greatness, Hamlet feels that life has lost its meaning and is filled with disappointment. His comment that, "man delights not me," reflects a deep existential crisis, and it adds to the growing sense of his melancholy and depression. Analysis and notes. 1. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern as manipulators. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's willingness to spy on Hamlet for Claudius shows their loyalty to the king, but it also underlines their lack of integrity. Hamlet quickly sees through their false concern, and their failure to earn his trust becomes evident. 2. Hamlet's disillusionment with humanity. The famous, "What a piece of work," speech illustrates Hamlet's alienation and discontent with life. His intellectual reflection on humanity's potential is contrasted with the emptiness he feels, marking a key point in his depression. This speech reveals that Hamlet values reason and intellect but feels that these qualities are ultimately useless in the face of the world's suffering and corruption. 3. Polonius, distrust and misreading of Hamlet. Polonius' theory about Hamlet's madness being due to love for Ophelia is completely wrong. While his observation of Hamlet's behavior is accurate, he misinterprets the cause. This scene continues Polonius' role as the self-important fool, more concerned with maintaining his status than truly understanding his son or the royal family. 4. Theme of spying and deception. The constant theme of spying emerges strongly. Everyone, including Hamlet, is watched or manipulates others, contributing to the web of deceit that entangles the characters. 5. Hamlet's plan for the play. Hamlet's decision to use the actors to trap Claudius with the play reveals his cunning but also his lack of direct action. He relies on external confirmation of his suspicions rather than confronting Claudius directly. This sets the tone for the complexity and delay in Hamlet's quest for revenge. Act 3, Scene 1, Hamlet's "to be or not to be" soliloquy and his interaction with Ophelia. Summary. The scene opens with King Claudius and Queen Gertrude discussing Hamlet's behavior with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They inform Claudius that Hamlet still seems deeply troubled, but they cannot pinpoint the cause of his madness. Claudius asks them to speak with Hamlet directly, hoping to uncover the truth. They agree and exit. Hamlet's To Be or Not to Be soliloquy. Alone, Hamlet delivers his famous soliloquy, one of the most important in the play and in all of literature. In it, Hamlet reflects on life and death, wondering whether it is better to end his suffering through death or to continue living despite the hardships. To be, or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. 3.1.5660. Hamlet ponders the suffering of life, asking whether it is nobler to endure the difficulties like pain, betrayal, and loss or to take action against them, possibly through death. However, he then questions what comes after death, the undiscovered country, from which no traveler returns, causing uncertainty and fear. The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others that we know not of. 3.1.7982. Ultimately, Hamlet's musings reveal his paralysis by analysis. He can't act decisively because he is overwhelmed by the unknowns of both life and death. This soliloquy marks him as a character struggling with deep existential despair and uncertainty. Ophelia's encounter with Hamlet. After the soliloquy, Ophelia enters, and Hamlet's demeanor changes. Ophelia, following her father's instructions, returns some of the gifts that Hamlet had previously given her, including a letter and a ring. She says she has come to repent for her actions, but Hamlet is cruel and dismissive toward her. Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? I am myself indifferent honest, but yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better. My mother had not borne me. I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious, with more offences at my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in. 3.1.121.125. He tells Ophelia to go to a nunnery to avoid bringing corruption into the world by bearing children, implying that all men are inherently flawed and that marriage only leads to suffering. He also seems to accuse her of being a part of the deceit in his life, implying that she is not trustworthy. Ophelia is clearly heartbroken by Hamlet's harsh words. She tries to reason with him, but he mocks her and suggests that she is unworthy of his love. Finally, he exits in a frenzy, leaving Ophelia devastated. Claudius and Gertrude's reaction. Watching from a distance, Claudius and Gertrude observe the interaction. Claudius begins to believe that Hamlet's madness is caused by his unrequited love for Ophelia, while Gertrude appears to be more sympathetic toward Hamlet's plight. Claudius, still unsure, decides that he will send Hamlet to England in order to remove him from the court and prevent further disruptions. Analysis and notes. 1. The soliloquy, Hamlet's existential crisis. The famous To Be or Not to Be soliloquy reveals Hamlet's philosophical nature and his profound disillusionment with life. He is consumed by doubt, questioning the value of life and whether it is worth enduring suffering. His fear of the unknown after death, an absence of certainty, paralyzes him, reinforcing the theme of indecision that runs throughout the play. 2. Ophelia as a victim. Ophelia's encounter with Hamlet illustrates her powerlessness and heartbreak. She has no agency, she's acting on the instructions of her father, who manipulates her, and in this moment, Hamlet rejects her cruelly, showing both his madness and the strain of his situation. Hamlet's treatment of Ophelia, especially the nunnery comment, reflects his disillusionment with women and his belief that all women are deceptive, a theme that grows stronger as Hamlet's internal conflict deepens. 3. Claudius, misreading of Hamlet's madness. Claudius continues to believe that Hamlet's madness is caused by his unrequited love for Ophelia, further missing the real depth of Hamlet's suffering, which is primarily due to his grief over his father's death and his need for revenge. Claudius, who has his own guilty conscience, remains unable to see through Hamlet's facade and continues to misinterpret his actions. 4. Hamlet's use of cruelty. Hamlet's harsh words to Ophelia, while seemingly cruel and dismissive, may also be seen as part of his larger plan to appear mad in front of others. It is unclear whether Hamlet's treatment of Ophelia is a form of self-protection or a genuine loss of affection. Either way, it highlights Hamlet's increasing emotional turmoil and growing isolation from the people around him. Act 3, Scene 2, The Play Within a Play and Claudius, Guilt. Summary. In this scene, Hamlet prepares for the performance of The Murder of Gonzago, the play he has asked the actors to perform as part of his plan to confirm Claudius' guilt. Hamlet is eager to see if Claudius will reveal any signs of guilt during the play, which he hopes will mirror his father's murder. Hamlet's interaction with the players. Before the play begins, Hamlet engages with the actors, giving them detailed instructions on how to perform their roles. He advises them to avoid overacting and to play their parts naturally, without exaggeration. His focus is on truthful portrayal, and he insists that the actors should avoid anything that would seem too artificial. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. 3.2.1012. He also tells them that if they play their parts well, he will reward them handsomely. This brief moment shows Hamlet's intellectual focus on the nature of acting and truth in art, which parallels his search for truth in the court. Ophelia and Hamlet's banter. After the actors take their positions, Hamlet speaks with Ophelia, who is seated nearby. They exchange sarcastic and playful words, and Hamlet mocks her. He asks her if she believes in flowers and virginity, treating the topic with bitterness and irony. He also makes a jarring remark about marriage and women. You are a fishmonger. Ellipsis. Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? I am myself indifferent honest, but yet I could accuse me of such things that it were better. My mother had not borne me. I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious, with more offences. At my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in. 3.2.118-125. His attitude seems deliberately hurtful, as though he is testing Ophelia's loyalty and reminding her of his own disillusionment with love. It's unclear if he is still playing the role of a madman or if his cruelty toward Ophelia has some deeper emotional truth. The play, The Murder of Gonzago. The performance begins, and Hamlet sits down to watch it with Claudius, Gertrude, Ophelia, and others from the court. The play tells the story of a king who is murdered by his brother, mirroring the murder of King Hamlet by Claudius. Hamlet whispers to Horatio, explaining the details of the plot and expressing his hope that Claudius will react in a way that reveals his guilt. The play's the thing, wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. 3.2.588-589. Claudius, reaction to the play. As the play progresses, the scene that mimics the murder of King Hamlet is performed. The actor playing the murderer pours poison into the ear of the king, just as Claudius did to Hamlet's father. When Claudius sees this, he suddenly rises from his seat, visibly disturbed, and demands that the play be stopped. He calls for lights and leaves the room in a hurry, confirming to Hamlet that the guilt of the murder is real. Hamlet, now certain that Claudius is guilty, reacts with satisfaction. I'll take the ghost's word for £1,000. Didst perceive? 3.2.240241. Gertrude's confrontation with Hamlet. After the play, Gertrude sends for Hamlet, and they have a private conversation in her chamber. She demands to know why he has been so cruel to Ophelia and accuses him of madness. Hamlet, still furious with his mother for marrying Claudius so quickly after his father's death, confronts her directly, accusing her of being complicit in the corruption of Denmark. He urges her to repent for her sins, but she protests and says she cannot bear the weight of the guilt. In this intense confrontation, Hamlet uses harsh language to accuse his mother of betraying his father. Frailty, thy name is woman. 1.2.146. His anger is not only directed at Claudius but also at Gertrude, whom he feels has betrayed both him and his father. He continues to criticize her for her hasty marriage to Claudius, comparing her to the fallen women of myth. Gertrude is overwhelmed and confused by Hamlet's accusations. However, Hamlet demands that she avoid further sin by turning away from Claudius. At this point, the ghost of King Hamlet appears in the room. Gertrude is unable to see the ghost, and she thinks Hamlet is hallucinating. The ghost urges Hamlet to remember his purpose and to focus on his revenge, but Hamlet is still consumed with anger. The scene ends with Hamlet leaving in a frenzy, while Gertrude is left feeling bewildered and frightened by his strange behavior. Analysis and notes. 1. The play within the play. The play's purpose is to confirm Claudius' guilt, and the king's reaction to the scene where the murderer pours poison into the king's ear gives Hamlet the confirmation he needs. The play within a play is a key moment of meta-theatricality, where the performance of the actors becomes a mirror for the real events in the play. It reflects the theme of appearance versus reality. Hamlet seeks to expose the truth through a staged performance. 2. Hamlet's interaction with Ophelia. Hamlet continues to treat Ophelia cruelly, making the question of whether he is feigning madness more complex. His treatment of her as a breeder of sinners reflects his belief in the corruption of women and his disillusionment with love. Some scholars interpret Hamlet's behavior as intentional cruelty meant to protect Ophelia from his own tangled emotions and the destructive forces around him, while others see it as a reflection of Hamlet's anger toward his mother. 3. Claudius' guilt. Claudius' reaction to the play is key. He is guilty, and his response shows that he cannot hide his conscience. The murder of Gonzago, the play within the play, serves as the moment of revelation. This public reaction leads to Hamlet's confidence in his father's ghost's words. 4. Gertrude's innocence and confusion. The ghost's appearance at the end of the scene is crucial, as it speaks directly to Hamlet and reminds him to focus on his revenge. Gertrude is left to wonder if Hamlet is truly mad. This scene highlights Gertrude's innocence. She does not fully understand the depth of Hamlet's anger and the reasons for it, especially when she cannot see the ghost. 5. Hamlet's delayed action. Although Hamlet now knows that Claudius is guilty, he still hesitates to act immediately. The play's success in confirming Claudius' guilt does not lead to immediate action, continuing the theme of Hamlet's indecision and delayed revenge. Act 3, Scene 3, Claudius' attempt at repentance and Hamlet's opportunity for revenge. Summary. This scene takes place in a private part of the castle. Claudius, deeply troubled by the guilt of murdering his brother King Hamlet, struggles with his conscience. He attempts to pray and seek forgiveness, but his guilt prevents him from truly repenting. Hamlet, who is nearby, seizes this moment as an opportunity for revenge, but ultimately decides not to act. Claudius, guilt and his attempt at prayer. The scene begins with Claudius alone, reflecting on the magnitude of his crime. He feels immense guilt for having murdered his brother to seize the throne and marry Gertrude. He tries to pray, but his prayers seem hollow and self-serving, as he is unwilling to give up the material rewards of his crime. Oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon a brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will. My stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. And like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. 3.3.3642. Claudius acknowledges that his crime is as old as Cain's murder of Abel, and he is filled with remorse. He expresses a desire to repent, but he realizes that he cannot truly do so while still holding on to the benefits of his crime, such as the throne and Gertrude. His guilt is overwhelming, but he cannot renounce what he has gained, which leaves him in a moral and spiritual stalemate. Hamlet's opportunity for revenge. As Claudius continues to pray, Hamlet enters and silently observes him from a distance. Seeing Claudius in a vulnerable state, Hamlet considers killing him right then and there. However, he hesitates, reasoning that if Claudius dies while praying, he may go to heaven. Now might I do it, Pat, now he is praying. And now I'll do, and so he goes to heaven. And so am I revenged. That would be scanned. A villain kills my father, and for that, I, his sole son, do this same villain send to heaven. 3.3.7377. Hamlet wants to ensure that Claudius suffers as his father did, in purgatory or hell, rather than being absolved through prayer and sent to heaven. Hamlet's hesitation here demonstrates his desire for a more complete revenge, where Claudius will suffer the same fate that Hamlet believes his father experienced. Hamlet's decision. Despite the opportunity to strike, Hamlet decides not to kill Claudius in this moment. He believes that by killing Claudius while he is praying, Claudius might receive divine forgiveness and be granted a heavenly reward. Hamlet seeks a more complete form of revenge, where Claudius will experience suffering in both life and the afterlife. My mother stays. This physic but prolongs thy sickly days. 3.3.9697. Hamlet exits, leaving Claudius still racked with guilt and still unable to find true peace. Analysis and notes. 1. Claudius, guilt and inability to repent. Claudius' struggle with guilt is central to his character development. He acknowledges his crime and desires to repent, but his unwillingness to give up the material gains of his sin, the throne and Gertrude, prevents him from seeking true forgiveness. This scene underscores Claudius' inner conflict and moral corruption. Claudius' words echo the famous biblical idea of the unforgivable sin, where his guilt is so deep that he cannot bring himself to truly repent. His prayer is more an attempt to ease his conscience than a sincere plea for divine mercy. 2. Hamlet's indecision. This scene highlights Hamlet's deep moral dilemma. Although he has the perfect opportunity to take action and kill Claudius, he hesitates. His reasoning is based on the desire for a more fitting revenge. He doesn't want Claudius to be forgiven and sent to heaven. This further deepens Hamlet's character as someone who is obsessed with justice and moral integrity, rather than simply acting on impulse. Hamlet's philosophical nature leads him to overthink and delay action, which becomes a central aspect of the tragedy. The moral reasoning behind Hamlet's inaction here shows that he is not just driven by revenge, but by a need to balance justice and consequence. 3. The theme of sin and redemption. The theme of sin and redemption is examined in Claudius' internal struggle. His inability to fully repent reflects the spiritual rot that has spread throughout the kingdom. Claudius' soul remains tarnished, and his sinful conscience prevents him from finding peace, symbolizing the broader corruption of Denmark. Hamlet's own moral compass, driven by an intense need for justice, is shown to be at odds with the world around him. The complex relationship between sin, repentance, and retribution deepens the tragic undertones of the play. Concluding thoughts. In Act 3, Scene 3, Claudius' struggle with guilt and Hamlet's delay in executing revenge bring the central themes of the play into sharper focus: revenge, justice, guilt, and the nature of the soul. Claudius' inability to repent fully and Hamlet's philosophical indecision highlight the tragedy of the situation, where both characters are trapped by their own flaws. Act 3, Scene 4, Hamlet confronts Gertrude and the ghost reappears. Summary. In this scene, Hamlet confronts his mother, Gertrude, in her private chamber. He is furious with her for marrying Claudius so quickly after the death of his father and accuses her of being complicit in the murder of his father. The confrontation becomes intense, and at a key moment, the ghost of King Hamlet reappears to remind Hamlet of his duty. Gertrude, unable to see the ghost, believes Hamlet is losing his mind, but the ghost's appearance reinforces Hamlet's purpose of revenge. Gertrude's chastisement by Hamlet. The scene begins with Gertrude trying to understand the cause of Hamlet's madness. She is clearly concerned about her son's state of mind and asks him to explain why he behaves so strangely. Hamlet, however, is not interested in discussing his madness. Instead, he immediately begins to scold his mother for her hasty marriage to Claudius, whom he holds responsible for the death of his father. Hamlet accuses Gertrude of betraying his father's memory and of being morally weak for marrying Claudius. He questions how she could fall for someone who murdered her husband and was clearly driven by greed and ambition. Frailty, thy name is woman. 1.2.146. He mocks her for her weakness and condemns her for marrying so soon after the death of his father. He tells her that her marriage to Claudius is akin to incest and corruption, and that her actions have tainted Denmark. Gertrude's response and Hamlet's anger. Gertrude, deeply disturbed by Hamlet's words, pleads with him to stop and questions whether he truly thinks she is capable of such cruelty. She claims that her actions were driven by love for Claudius and that she never intended to betray Hamlet's father. However, Hamlet does not relent. He insists that her love for Claudius is tainted by sin, and he urges her to turn away from him. Hamlet's anger escalates as he continues to chastise her for her perceived moral failures. At this point, Hamlet's emotions become even more intense. He rails against women in general, blaming them for their sexuality and their role in corrupting society. He becomes increasingly frustrated as he fails to get through to his mother, who continues to defend herself and her actions. The ghost's appearance. In the midst of this confrontation, the ghost of King Hamlet appears. He enters the scene and speaks directly to Hamlet, urging him to remember his purpose and focus on revenge. The ghost reminds Hamlet that Gertrude's sins are her own and that Hamlet's task is to take revenge on Claudius, not to reform his mother. However, Gertrude cannot see the ghost, and she becomes increasingly alarmed as she sees Hamlet speaking to an invisible figure. She believes that Hamlet is truly mad and is losing his grip on reality. Hamlet tries to explain that the ghost is real and is guiding him, but Gertrude remains unconvinced and grows increasingly distressed by his behavior. The ghost eventually vanishes, leaving Hamlet to continue his confrontation with his mother. He urges her to repent for her sins and to reject Claudius, but Gertrude is too frightened and confused to fully understand him. Hamlet's departure and Gertrude's resolution. In the final moments of the scene, Hamlet, now frustrated, warns his mother that she must not allow Claudius to continue corrupting Denmark. He tells her that if she truly loves him, she must change her ways and reject Claudius. He also advises her not to speak of the encounter to anyone, especially not to Claudius. Hamlet exits, leaving Gertrude to contemplate his words. She is deeply shaken and seems to be grappling with the emotional weight of Hamlet's accusations. In her solitude, she appears to come to some resolution about her actions, though it is unclear whether she will act upon Hamlet's advice. Analysis and notes. 1. Hamlet's anger at Gertrude. Hamlet's outbursts are driven by a deep sense of betrayal and disillusionment with his mother. He cannot comprehend how she could marry Claudius so quickly after his father's death, and he feels that her weakness in doing so reflects poorly on both her and Denmark. His verbal assault on Gertrude is a reflection of his frustration with the world around him, where his moral compass seems at odds with the actions of others. His famous line, "Frailty, thy name is woman," speaks to his disillusionment with women, especially his mother, whom he believes is responsible for the moral decay in Denmark. This idea is reinforced by his view that her sexuality and quick remarriage have led to corruption. 2. The ghost's reappearance. The ghost's appearance serves as a reminder to Hamlet of his mission. The ghost urges Hamlet to focus on his revenge rather than his emotional and philosophical concerns with his mother's behavior. This suggests that Hamlet is struggling not only with the task of avenging his father's death but also with his internal moral and existential dilemmas. The ghost's presence is also important because it highlights the spiritual aspect of the play. Hamlet is caught between the mortal world, where he must take revenge, and the divine realm, where his moral and philosophical beliefs seem to conflict with his actions. 3. Gertrude's innocence and confusion. Gertrude's reaction to Hamlet's accusations reveals her genuine confusion and emotional distress. She does not fully understand Hamlet's anger and believes he is simply mad. This is significant because it shows her innocence in the sense that she may not fully grasp the implications of her actions. However, there is also a sense of guilt in Gertrude's character, as she is unable to fully defend her marriage to Claudius, suggesting that she may be complicit in the corruption of Denmark in a way that she cannot acknowledge. Her inability to see the ghost also makes her an innocent bystander in the larger moral drama, but her internal conflict is evident. 4. Hamlet's mission versus his emotions. The scene reinforces the dual nature of Hamlet's mission. He is torn between the desire for revenge against Claudius and his moral reflections on his mother's actions. His emotional outbursts show his frustration at being unable to achieve a decisive form of revenge, and his inability to act swiftly and decisively is central to the tragic nature of the play. This scene also portrays Hamlet's emotional vulnerability. His confrontation with his mother is an emotional release, but it is also a moral reckoning with the corruption that surrounds him. The tension between his need for justice and his philosophical doubts continues to deepen. Concluding thoughts. In Act 3, Scene 4, Hamlet's confrontation with his mother escalates the emotional intensity of the play. His disillusionment with Gertrude and his struggle with his own mission create a complex emotional landscape. The ghost's return highlights Hamlet's duty to avenge his father, but it also serves as a reminder of the psychological torment Hamlet faces in reconciling his moral and emotional impulses with his mission of vengeance. Act 4, Scene 1, Claudius learns of Polonius' death and plans against Hamlet. Summary. This scene takes place in Claudius' chambers. Gertrude informs Claudius of Hamlet's recent act of violence, specifically the killing of Polonius. Claudius, though initially concerned for his own safety, begins plotting how to deal with Hamlet's growing instability. He realizes that Hamlet's behavior is becoming a danger to the kingdom, and he decides to send Hamlet away to England to ensure the safety of the court and maintain his own power. Meanwhile, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are tasked with finding and securing Hamlet, who has hidden Polonius' body. Gertrude tells Claudius about Polonius' death. The scene opens with Gertrude entering and informing Claudius of the murder of Polonius at the hands of Hamlet. She explains that Hamlet, in a moment of madness, mistakenly killed Polonius, thinking he was Claudius. Gertrude emphasizes that Hamlet is unstable and that his actions have become increasingly erratic and dangerous. However, she does not seem to fully understand the consequences of Hamlet's actions, as she suggests that Hamlet was merely acting out of madness. Claudius, upon hearing this, is immediately concerned with the political implications of Hamlet's violence. He realizes that Hamlet's actions could lead to greater instability within the court and that the kingdom's security might be at risk. Claudius begins to calculate his next steps. Claudius' reaction and his plans. Though Claudius is worried about the murder of Polonius, his first priority is his own safety. He sees Hamlet as a threat to his reign, especially after the events of the past few scenes, including Hamlet's growing anger and his failure to be controlled. Claudius knows that Hamlet is not only a danger to him but also to the political stability of Denmark. Claudius says, "Oh heavy deed, it had been so much better to be mad. With such a wicked deed as that do it." 4.1.810. Claudius' first reaction is to focus on damage control. He contemplates how Hamlet's actions could lead to an uprising or a loss of authority, especially since Polonius was so closely connected to him through his role in the court. At this point, Claudius begins to consider the best way to handle Hamlet, not just for retribution but for the preservation of his own power. Claudius' decision to send Hamlet to England. Realizing that Hamlet is becoming a liability, Claudius decides that the best course of action is to send Hamlet away to England. By doing so, he hopes to remove Hamlet from the political equation temporarily and avoid any further violence that could endanger his rule. Claudius plans to send a letter to the English court, instructing them to execute Hamlet upon arrival, thus ensuring that Hamlet will not return to pose any further threats to his authority. Claudius also sees the opportunity to remove Hamlet from Denmark before the public can react to the murder. He sees the situation as one where Hamlet's death is a necessary sacrifice to protect his own power and restore order to the kingdom. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's task. Claudius orders Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to find Hamlet and bring him to the court so they can send him off to England. The two former friends of Hamlet are now tasked with ensuring that Hamlet is captured and sent away without resistance. They are sent to search for Hamlet, who has hidden Polonius' body. Gertrude's concern for Hamlet. While Claudius is calculating how to handle Hamlet, Gertrude expresses genuine concern for her son's well-being. She does not fully understand the dangerous political ramifications of Hamlet's actions and instead seems focused on the emotional consequences for him. She asks Claudius if there is any way to redeem Hamlet and protect him from the consequences of his madness. However, Claudius remains focused on the practicalities of securing the throne and protecting his reign. Exit of Claudius and Gertrude. As the scene concludes, Claudius gives further instructions to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, emphasizing the importance of removing Hamlet from the scene before the situation spirals out of control. Meanwhile, Gertrude seems to be in an emotional state of confusion and concern over Hamlet's fate, though she has little understanding of the political manipulations that Claudius is orchestrating. Analysis and notes. 1. Claudius, political machinations. Claudius' response to Hamlet's violence is primarily driven by self-preservation. He immediately seeks to eliminate the threat Hamlet poses, not out of any moral concern for Polonius' death, but because Hamlet's actions have the potential to undermine his authority as king. Claudius' decision to send Hamlet to England is a pragmatic move that aims to remove the potential for further disruption in Denmark. This scene underscores Claudius' manipulative nature. His concern is never for Hamlet's well-being but rather for the political stability of his reign. Claudius is calculating in his response, weighing the options and choosing what will keep him in power. 2. Gertrude's role as Hamlet's mother. Gertrude's concern for Hamlet is one of her most humanizing traits. While she does not seem to fully grasp the gravity of Hamlet's actions, she is clearly distressed by the violence and the emotional toll it has taken on him. However, her naivety and blind loyalty to Claudius prevent her from fully understanding the larger issues at play. Her ability to see Hamlet as a son in need of protection shows that she may not be fully complicit in Claudius' plans, but it also demonstrates her inability to see the political manipulations around her. Her love for Hamlet conflicts with her loyalty to Claudius, creating an emotional tension that will continue to unravel in later scenes. 3. Hamlet's growing threat to Claudius. This scene marks a turning point in the plot, where Hamlet's actions are no longer just a personal tragedy but have significant political ramifications. Hamlet's violence and his growing instability are now seen as a threat to the order of Denmark. Claudius recognizes that Hamlet's unchecked behavior could lead to disorder in the kingdom, and his decision to send Hamlet away is a way to maintain control over the political landscape. The decision to send Hamlet to England for execution illustrates the finality with which Claudius views the situation. Hamlet has gone from being a prince to a dangerous threat, and Claudius now seeks to neutralize him for the sake of his own survival. 4. The theme of madness and morality. The question of madness continues to be a central theme. Gertrude refers to Hamlet's actions as madness, and Claudius' reaction to Hamlet's behavior reveals how dangerous Hamlet's perceived insanity has become to the court. Claudius does not take Hamlet's supposed madness seriously in terms of guilt or redemption, but rather as a political liability. The contrast between Gertrude's emotional response and Claudius' pragmatic response highlights the different ways the two characters approach the moral and emotional consequences of Hamlet's actions. Claudius seeks to control the situation, while Gertrude seems to want to preserve her son's well-being. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 1, we see the escalating political tension as Claudius responds to Hamlet's actions with careful planning. While Hamlet's violence and perceived madness are threatening to Claudius' rule, Gertrude's emotional response shows the personal stakes of the situation. Claudius' decision to send Hamlet to England represents a turning point in the play, where Hamlet's fate is now tied to the power struggle within Denmark, and his revenge plot is temporarily interrupted. Act 4, Scene 2, Hamlet is pursued by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Summary. This scene takes place after the death of Polonius. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are tasked by Claudius with finding Hamlet, who has hidden Polonius' body. They seek him out and attempt to confront him. Hamlet, however, mocks them and refuses to tell them where he has hidden the body. Instead, he continues to display his erratic behavior, evading their questions and showing contempt for their loyalty to Claudius. Ultimately, Hamlet makes an ironic remark about the fate of the body, and he is taken away to be sent to England. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern search for Hamlet. The scene begins with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern searching for Hamlet. They are under Claudius' orders to locate Hamlet and retrieve the body of Polonius, which Hamlet has hidden after killing him in the previous scene. They are aware that Hamlet's actions are growing more dangerous, but they are still loyal to Claudius and willing to follow his command. The two friends have clearly been instructed to act as intermediaries, but their relationship with Hamlet is becoming more strained. Hamlet has clearly distanced himself from them, and they are now viewed as mere servants of the king in Hamlet's eyes. They seem out of their depth in trying to locate the body and face growing resistance from Hamlet. Hamlet's mocking response. When Rosencrantz and Guildenstern finally find Hamlet, he does not respond to them as friends but instead mocks them for their obedience to Claudius. He engages in wordplay, taunting them with paradoxes and riddles, further highlighting his disillusionment with the world around him. At one point, Rosencrantz asks Hamlet where Polonius' body is, and Hamlet responds with a series of absurd answers, evading the question entirely. In the dungeon, in the castle, where else? But why should you ask such a thing? Are you looking for him? Or do you only want to tell Claudius about me? Hamlet's mockery underscores the growing distance between him and the people around him. His madness appears to have become more deliberate, as he uses it to disrupt the attempts of those who try to control or manipulate him. Hamlet's irony and dismissal of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. In a more ironic moment, Hamlet, realizing they are trying to get him to reveal the body's location, tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that the body is being kept in a garden. He remarks that the body will be dealt with in a fit place, but refuses to provide specifics, adding to their frustration. Hamlet's behavior continues to show his contempt for their loyalty to Claudius, and his mocking tone highlights his frustration with the situation. At one point, Hamlet mocks their efforts by saying, "How now? A rat. Dead for a ducat, dead." This is a reference to Polonius' body, which Hamlet treats as inconsequential and insignificant. Hamlet uses the image of a rat to demonstrate his disdain for Polonius, likening him to something foul and beneath notice. This reflects Hamlet's growing alienation from the world and his increasing disrespect for the authority figures around him. Despite their attempts to get him to reveal the body's location, Hamlet refuses to cooperate. He deliberately frustrates Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are unable to make any sense of his behavior. Hamlet then abruptly dismisses them, continuing to mock their inability to control him. Hamlet's departure. Hamlet's final words to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern express his utter disregard for their presence. He speaks of his forthcoming departure to England and leaves them with a final irony. He is being sent to England for his safety, but he knows his death is already plotted by Claudius. He tells them that they are like the carriers of the letter, and they are simply carrying out the orders given to them by Claudius. Hamlet has fully realized their lack of independence and mocks them for being agents of Claudius' will rather than true friends. His cryptic and mocking remarks are a testament to his disillusionment with his relationships and his realization that the world is full of manipulators. Conclusion of the scene. The scene ends with Hamlet departing, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are left standing in frustration. They are unable to make sense of Hamlet's behavior and are forced to comply with their orders. Hamlet, on the other hand, continues to act on his own terms, reflecting his growing sense of autonomy and his readiness to follow his own path, regardless of the consequences. Analysis and notes. 1. Hamlet's increasing isolation. This scene marks a further step in Hamlet's isolation. He treats Rosencrantz and Guildenstern with complete disdain and mockery, showing how far removed he is from the people around him. They were once his friends, but now Hamlet sees them as mere extensions of Claudius' will. This reinforces the emotional distance Hamlet has created between himself and the court, and it highlights his disillusionment with those he once trusted. The fact that Hamlet mocks their attempts to find the body and gives them misleading answers shows that he is actively resisting authority and any attempts to control him. His response to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern shows a deepened sense of autonomy and a rejection of the role others want him to play. 2. Hamlet's role as the outsider. The way Hamlet interacts with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern paints him as the outsider in the play. He has rejected his former role as a dutiful prince and is no longer willing to comply with the expectations placed on him by his father, mother, or Claudius. His behavior in this scene reflects a rejection of the social and political order, which he now views as corrupt and manipulative. This alienation is reflected in his mockery and refusal to cooperate with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He has moved beyond his earlier grief and is now consumed by anger at the world around him. Hamlet's increasing alienation from others is a crucial element of his character development and sets the stage for the tragic events that will follow. 3. The theme of death and mortality. Hamlet's comments about the body in this scene emphasize the theme of death and mortality. He casually dismisses the body of Polonius and treats it as something trivial, showing how desensitized he has become to death. His reference to the rat, something that needs to be killed, further dehumanizes Polonius and reflects Hamlet's deepening disillusionment with the world around him. This treatment of Polonius' death also shows how Hamlet's actions have consequences that affect others. While he has been consumed by the quest for revenge against Claudius, his actions have spiraled out of control, leading to more and more collateral damage. 4. The irony of Hamlet's situation. There is deep irony in this scene. Hamlet has been sent away to England, ostensibly for his safety, but in reality, it is a plot for his execution. His awareness of this irony shows his growing cynicism about the world around him. His life is now being controlled by others, yet he still displays a sense of freedom in his mocking behavior. His final remarks about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are also ironic. They are carrying out orders to send him to England, yet they have no idea what those orders truly mean. Hamlet is fully aware of the plot, but they remain in the dark, which highlights the theme of deception running throughout the play. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 2, Hamlet's behavior becomes even more erratic and mocking, underscoring his deepening isolation from the people around him. His interactions with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are full of irony, disrespect, and cynicism, reflecting his growing alienation from society. The theme of death continues to loom over the play as Hamlet disrespects Polonius' body and contemplates his own fate. This scene sets the stage for Hamlet's inevitable departure to England, where his fate will take a tragic turn. Act 4, Scene 3, Claudius sends Hamlet to England and plans his death. Summary. In this scene, Claudius prepares to send Hamlet to England, but it's clear that the primary reason for this is to have Hamlet executed once he arrives. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are tasked with escorting Hamlet on his journey, though they are unaware of the true purpose behind the trip. Claudius takes a moment to reflect on his own troubled conscience and the murder of Polonius, before revealing his plans for Hamlet's death to the audience. Claudius reflects on the murder of Polonius. The scene opens with Claudius in his chamber, looking increasingly concerned about the consequences of Polonius' death. He reflects on the political chaos that Hamlet's actions are causing and is aware that he needs to take action to eliminate the problem. Claudius confesses his guilt to the audience, expressing that Hamlet's violence, though somewhat understandable, has now reached a point where it cannot be ignored. Claudius says, "O heavy deed! It had been so much better to be mad. With such a wicked deed as that do it." 4.1.810. Here, Claudius is acknowledging the grievous nature of Hamlet's actions, but he's more concerned about his own position than the morality of Hamlet's deed. Claudius orders Hamlet's departure to England. After reflecting on the political consequences of Hamlet's actions, Claudius realizes that Hamlet cannot be allowed to remain in Denmark. He believes that sending Hamlet to England will give him the opportunity to have Hamlet executed without creating further tension in Denmark. By sending Hamlet away, Claudius seeks to both remove the danger Hamlet poses to his reign and avoid the repercussions of killing him in Denmark. Claudius instructs Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to take Hamlet on the next ship to England. He also gives them specific instructions to ensure Hamlet's safe transport, not knowing that the purpose of the trip is not safety, but rather to secure Hamlet's death. Claudius, soliloquy, guilt and worries. Claudius' soliloquy in this scene is crucial to understanding the depth of his moral struggle. While he is concerned about Hamlet's death, his real focus is on how the death of Polonius and Hamlet's increasingly violent actions could jeopardize his rule. Claudius feels a sense of guilt not just for the murder of his brother, King Hamlet, but for the political instability Hamlet's actions have created. He admits that he fears Hamlet's vengeance and seeks a way to eliminate him without losing his own authority. Claudius says, "My fault is past. But, oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder. That cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. My crown, mine own ambition, and my queen." 4.3.4752. Here, Claudius expresses his internal conflict. While he wants to seek forgiveness, he cannot do so genuinely because he still holds the power and privilege that resulted from his crime. His guilt is not sufficient to relinquish the things he has gained, his crown and queen. This soliloquy highlights Claudius' self-awareness but also his inability to genuinely repent for his actions. Hamlet's departure and the king's plan. As Rosencrantz and Guildenstern prepare to escort Hamlet to England, Claudius' plan to have Hamlet executed is now set in motion. Claudius assures them that Hamlet's departure will help restore order, but it is clear that Claudius has no interest in Hamlet's well-being. His primary concern is to remove the threat Hamlet poses. Before the scene ends, Claudius gives final instructions to ensure that Hamlet's execution is carried out as planned. He reassures himself that this is the necessary course of action to protect his reign and keep the kingdom stable. Analysis and notes. 1. Claudius, guilt and inability to repent. Claudius' guilt over the murder of Polonius and the continuing threat of Hamlet's violence demonstrate that, while he may be self-aware, he is still fundamentally driven by self-preservation. His inability to genuinely repent highlights the difference between feeling guilty and actually seeking redemption. His guilt does not lead to any meaningful change in his actions. Instead of showing remorse, Claudius attempts to eliminate the problem by sending Hamlet to England, where he hopes the situation will be resolved. Claudius' admission that he cannot give up his crown, ambition, or queen reveals his inner conflict. Though he acknowledges his sin, his desire to maintain power overrides any moral concerns. This reflects his greed and the moral decay that has accompanied his ascent to the throne. 2. The theme of power and morality. Claudius' actions continue to illustrate the theme of power and morality that runs throughout the play. The corrupting influence of ambition and power is evident in Claudius' reluctance to give up the material rewards of his crime. His failure to truly repent for his brother's murder contrasts sharply with Hamlet's moral struggle, suggesting that Claudius is more concerned with the consequences of his actions than the moral implications. This scene further establishes Claudius as a man of action rather than reflection. Unlike Hamlet, who is paralyzed by indecision, Claudius is pragmatic and willing to take extreme measures to ensure his survival. Claudius' plan to have Hamlet executed demonstrates his ruthlessness and his willingness to use others as pawns in his political schemes. 3. Hamlet's fate, the political solution to a personal problem. The decision to send Hamlet to England as a political maneuver, an attempt to solve the problem of Hamlet's behavior by removing him from the kingdom. This plan echoes Claudius' earlier efforts to deal with Hamlet's madness by using others to control him. However, Claudius' approach is ultimately fatal. Hamlet's journey to England is not one of escape, but of execution. This demonstrates that Claudius views Hamlet as a threat that must be neutralized, rather than a person to be saved or redeemed. The audience understands the irony of Hamlet's situation. Claudius sends Hamlet away, believing he will be protected, but Hamlet is actually being sent to his death. This underlines the theme of deception that pervades the play, as characters are often unaware of the true nature of their actions. 4. The role of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern continue to serve as pawns in Claudius' larger schemes. They are loyal to Claudius and are tasked with carrying out his orders, but they remain unaware of the true purpose of Hamlet's journey. Their inability to see the bigger picture highlights their naivety and blind obedience. They are caught in the machinations of others, showing the lack of agency they have in the larger conflict. 5. Claudius' Machiavellian nature. Claudius' Machiavellian nature is on full display in this scene. He is willing to take any action, no matter how ruthless, to maintain his power. His manipulations and his inability to truly repent demonstrate that his rule is driven not by a sense of justice, but by a desire to preserve his reign at all costs. His political maneuvering, while pragmatic, reveals the moral emptiness at the core of his character. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 3, Claudius sets his plan in motion to send Hamlet to England, where he will be executed. This scene illustrates the depth of Claudius' corruption, as his guilt over his own crimes is overshadowed by his self-preservation and desire to maintain control. The scene also highlights the political manipulation that drives much of the action in the play, with Claudius willing to sacrifice Hamlet's life in order to maintain his own position of power. The audience is aware of the irony in Hamlet's departure. While it seems like a chance for Hamlet to escape, it is actually a plot to ensure his death. Act 4, Scene 4, Hamlet contemplates his fate and sees Fortinbras' army. Summary. In this scene, Hamlet encounters a Norwegian captain who is leading a group of soldiers from Fortinbras, and the conversation sparks Hamlet's deep reflection on his own actions and purpose. As Hamlet learns that Fortinbras is willing to risk war over a trivial piece of land, he feels ashamed of his own inaction and reflects on his failure to avenge his father's death. This scene sets the stage for Hamlet's return to action, as he resolves to be more decisive in his pursuit of revenge. Fortinbras' army marches on. The scene opens with a Norwegian captain and a group of soldiers marching through Denmark on their way to Poland. Fortinbras has secured permission from Claudius to lead an army through Denmark to attack a small, insignificant piece of land in Poland. The captain explains to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that Fortinbras is willing to fight for the land, even though it is barely worth the cost of the conflict. This trivial cause is an example of Fortinbras' ambition and willingness to fight for honor and glory, no matter how inconsequential the outcome may be. Hamlet's reflection and encounter with the captain. As Hamlet overhears the captain's conversation, he is struck by the contrast between Fortinbras' determination and his own failure to act. He is deeply troubled by his own procrastination and the fact that he has not yet avenged his father's death, despite having had the opportunity to do so. Hamlet reflects on the fact that, while he has been consumed by doubt and hesitation, Fortinbras is willing to risk everything for the sake of honor over something so minor. Hamlet says, "How all occasions do inform against me, and spur my dull revenge. What is a man, if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more." 4.4.3235. In these lines, Hamlet is filled with self-loathing as he realizes that he has failed to take decisive action. He compares himself to a beast, someone whose purpose is merely to consume and live passively. He contrasts this with Fortinbras, whose sense of honor drives him to action, even for a worthless cause. Hamlet's monologue, a resolution to act. This encounter with the captain becomes a turning point for Hamlet. He begins to question his own identity and the purpose of his life. He wonders what it means to be a man if he cannot fulfill his duty to avenge his father. He reflects on the weight of revenge and the shame he feels for not taking action sooner. Hamlet says, "I do not know why yet I live to say this things to do. Sith I have cause and will and strength and means to dote. Examples gross as earth exhort me." 4.4.3639. In this soliloquy, Hamlet expresses his frustration at the fact that, even though he has all the necessary qualities to take action, cause, will, strength, and means, he has failed to do so. He acknowledges the shame he feels for not having avenged his father's death, especially when Fortinbras is so willing to risk everything for a far less important cause. He concludes his monologue with a new resolve, saying, "Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth." 4.4.6566. Here, Hamlet vows to dedicate himself to vengeance from that point forward. His thoughts will be bloody, focused on revenge, or they will be meaningless. This marks a significant change in Hamlet's character. He has made the decision to act and put aside his doubts and delays. The captain departs. After Hamlet's reflection and his new resolution, the captain and the soldiers leave to continue their march. The scene ends with Hamlet remaining alone, now determined to take decisive action in avenging his father's death. Analysis and notes. 1. Hamlet's procrastination and self-criticism. One of the most prominent themes in this scene is Hamlet's procrastination. He has already acknowledged that he has failed to avenge his father after so much time has passed. In this scene, the presence of Fortinbras, a character who embodies action and ambition, serves as a mirror to Hamlet's own inaction. Hamlet's failure to act is emphasized by Fortinbras' willingness to go to war for a trivial cause, and Hamlet's self-criticism is evident in his monologue. Hamlet's feeling of shame and self-loathing leads him to question what it means to be a man. His inner turmoil highlights the psychological conflict at the heart of the play, where Hamlet is constantly torn between action and thought, and between his desire for revenge and his moral concerns. 2. Fortinbras is a foil to Hamlet. Fortinbras acts as a foil to Hamlet. While Hamlet hesitates and reflects on his actions, Fortinbras acts without question or hesitation. Fortinbras is willing to go to war for a cause that is negligible and represents a simple, honorable pursuit of glory, while Hamlet, who has a much more significant personal reason for revenge, cannot bring himself to act. The contrast between Fortinbras and Hamlet underscores Hamlet's inner conflict. Fortinbras' willingness to act for a cause as inconsequential as the Polish land highlights how Hamlet has become paralyzed by his need for moral clarity and certainty, which ultimately delays his revenge. 3. The theme of honor and action. This scene also emphasizes the theme of honor and its role in motivating individuals to take action. Fortinbras is driven by a sense of honor and a desire for glory, even when the cause does not justify the bloodshed. Hamlet, on the other hand, has a much more personal reason for revenge. He seeks to avenge his father's murder, but his sense of honor is complicated by his desire to ensure that his revenge is just. Hamlet's reflection on Fortinbras' behavior leads him to conclude that action without hesitation is necessary for him to achieve his goal. His sense of honor compels him to take revenge, and he resolves to dedicate himself to this goal from that point forward, forsaking his previous doubts and indecision. 4. Hamlet's resolution, a turning point. The final lines of this scene are crucial to understanding Hamlet's psychological shift. When Hamlet declares, "Oh, from this time forth my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth," he makes a conscious decision to stop overthinking and to focus on revenge. This marks the end of Hamlet's indecision and is a pivotal moment in the play, as it shows that Hamlet has finally chosen action over contemplation. This resolution signals that Hamlet is now willing to fully embrace his role as an avenger. The play shifts toward its final acts, where Hamlet's resolve will be put to the test and will ultimately lead to the tragic conclusion. 5. The significance of the captain's role. The Norwegian captain serves as a minor character who nevertheless plays an important role in Hamlet's development. His encounter with Hamlet provokes a change in Hamlet's mindset, pushing him to confront his own inaction and ultimately make the decision to act. The captain is a catalyst in this moment, as his explanation of Fortinbras' ambition highlights Hamlet's failure to act and sets him on the path toward taking decisive action. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 4, Hamlet's encounter with the captain of Fortinbras' army serves as a crucial moment in the play. This scene marks Hamlet's turning point, where he shifts from a state of procrastination and doubt to one of decisive action. He resolves to pursue revenge with the same single-mindedness and determination that Fortinbras has shown in his own pursuit of glory, and this decision sets the stage for the tragic events that will follow in the final acts. Act 4, Scene 5, Ophelia's madness and the rising tension. Summary. In this scene, Ophelia enters in a state of madness, singing cryptic songs and speaking in disjointed phrases. Her behavior disturbs everyone around her, and it is clear that the death of her father, Polonius, has taken a heavy toll on her mental state. Gertrude, deeply concerned, calls for Laertes, Polonius' son, to return to Denmark from France. Meanwhile, Claudius and Gertrude try to understand Ophelia's condition and discuss the political situation with the arrival of Laertes, who is seeking vengeance for his father's death. Ophelia's mad entrance. The scene opens with Ophelia entering the royal court, visibly distraught and mentally unstable. She sings two songs, which, though seemingly innocent or nonsensical, hint at her grief and the emotional pain she is experiencing. She sings of betrayal, death, and love lost, all of which reference the tragic events that have led to her madness, her father's death and Hamlet's rejection. Ophelia sings, "They bore him barefaced on the bier. Hey non nani, nani, hey nani. And in his grave reigned many a tear." 4.5.1618. The song evokes Polonius' funeral and the grief that Ophelia feels for the loss of her father. Another song she sings references the broken nature of love. "Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow." 4.5.2830. This is a reference to her relationship with Hamlet, which has deteriorated, and could be interpreted as her sense of betrayal and heartbreak. The songs reflect Ophelia's confusion and her inability to process the trauma she's experienced. Gertrude's concern for Ophelia. Gertrude is deeply concerned for Ophelia and attempts to understand the cause of her madness. She tries to comfort her, but Ophelia's condition only worsens, showing that the loss of her father has pushed her to the brink of insanity. Gertrude says, "Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown." 4.5.1. Here, Gertrude expresses sorrow for Ophelia's lost sanity, remarking on the young woman's former intelligence and beauty that has now been shattered by the recent events. Claudius and Gertrude discuss the situation. As Ophelia's madness becomes more evident, Claudius and Gertrude attempt to understand the larger context of the situation. They discuss the political unrest in Denmark following Polonius' death and the arrival of Laertes, Polonius' son, who has returned to Denmark from France to seek revenge for his father. Claudius is worried that Laertes' rage will lead to an uprising, and he is concerned about the consequences of Hamlet's actions. Claudius says, "Laertes shall be king, but I will not be a king without his people." 4.5.6162. Claudius worries that Laertes' anger and sense of injustice will mobilize the people of Denmark against him. His remarks here reveal the political instability that Hamlet's actions have caused and the growing threat to his rule. He begins to fear that Laertes might stir the public and challenge Claudius' authority. Ophelia and Laertes' reunion. At the end of the scene, Laertes arrives, and he is immediately struck by Ophelia's condition. He is filled with grief and rage, particularly because of how his father's death and Ophelia's madness have shaken him. He sees the state of the court and knows that Claudius has played a part in the tragic events, fueling his desire for revenge. As Laertes and Ophelia meet, he is devastated by her mental breakdown, and the scene ends with him swearing to avenge the wrongdoings against his family. Analysis and notes. 1. Ophelia's madness is a symbol of grief. Ophelia's madness serves as a powerful symbol of the devastating emotional toll caused by the deaths of her father and the rejection by Hamlet. Her descent into madness is a reflection of the destructive impact that these events have had on her mental state. The songs she sings represent the fragility of her emotional well-being, and the ambiguity of her words highlights the chaotic state of her mind. Ophelia's mental breakdown is also a representation of the larger chaos and instability in Denmark, as the royal family is crumbling and the political structure is in disarray. Her madness stands in stark contrast to Hamlet's calculated indecision, showing the different ways in which characters react to the pressures and tragedies in their lives. While Hamlet grapples with introspection and procrastination, Ophelia's reaction is to lose herself entirely. 2. The theme of female suffering. Ophelia's suffering is tied directly to her gender in the play. Throughout the story, Ophelia has been controlled by the men around her, her father Polonius, her brother Laertes, and her lover Hamlet. These men define her identity and control her actions, leaving Ophelia with little autonomy or agency. In this scene, her madness can be seen as a reaction to her overwhelming loss of control. The men in her life have either abandoned her or used her, leaving her in a position where she can no longer cope with the emotional pain. Gertrude's response to Ophelia's madness shows that she, too, is deeply affected by the tragedy. However, Gertrude's role in the court is somewhat different. She is a queen with political power, but she, too, is controlled by the actions of the men around her, particularly Claudius. The play suggests that female characters in a male-dominated world are often disempowered and subject to the whims of the men around them. 3. Claudius, political concerns. Claudius, political instability is another major theme in this scene. His fear of Laertes' vengeance reflects his growing concern about the fragile nature of his rule. Claudius sees the rising tension between himself and Laertes, and he is particularly worried that the public's sympathy for Laertes will turn against him. This concern highlights Claudius' paranoia and his growing sense of danger, as he realizes that his reign is under threat from multiple directions. Hamlet's actions have already undermined his authority, and now Laertes threatens to expose Claudius' role in Polonius' death. 4. Laertes, return and desire for revenge. Laertes is introduced as a figure of action and decisiveness, a contrast to Hamlet's indecision. Laertes returns to Denmark with a clear purpose, to seek revenge for the death of his father. His reaction to Ophelia's madness is one of intense anger and frustration, and he is determined to take action. Laertes serves as a foil to Hamlet. While Hamlet has been paralyzed by doubts and philosophical reflection, Laertes is willing to act decisively, even if it means risking his life in the process. The presence of Laertes' rage suggests that the next phase of the drama will be a collision between Hamlet's desire for revenge and Laertes' immediate willingness to act. This sets the stage for the final confrontation between the two men. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 5, Ophelia's descent into madness symbolizes the devastating effects of loss and emotional trauma. The scene also highlights the growing political instability in Denmark, as Claudius fears the consequences of Laertes' return and the threat it poses to his rule. Laertes' desire for revenge will soon bring him into conflict with Hamlet, and Ophelia's madness provides a tragic backdrop to the rising tension. Act 4, Scene 6, Hamlet's return to Denmark. Summary. In this scene, Horatio receives a letter from Hamlet, informing him of his return to Denmark after being captured by pirates. Hamlet describes how he managed to escape a perilous situation and is now on his way back to confront Claudius and complete his revenge. This scene marks a shift toward action, as Hamlet's return to Denmark signals the beginning of the final climactic events of the play. The letter from Hamlet. The scene opens with Horatio, Hamlet's trusted friend, receiving a letter from Hamlet, which is delivered by a gentleman. The letter informs Horatio of Hamlet's adventures and the strange circumstances of his return. Hamlet writes that he was on a ship bound for England, where Claudius had sent him to be executed. However, during the journey, the ship was attacked by pirates, and Hamlet was taken captive. In a stroke of fortune, Hamlet managed to make a deal with the pirates, offering them money and a safe passage in exchange for his freedom. Hamlet writes, "No leisure baited. No, not I sent to you the letters. I had my perfect reward." 4.6.1112. This demonstrates Hamlet's resourcefulness and his ability to turn a dangerous situation to his advantage. He now plans to return to Denmark, determined to carry out his revenge against Claudius. Horatio's reaction. After reading Hamlet's letter, Horatio is both relieved and excited to hear that his friend is returning to Denmark. He is eager to assist Hamlet in any way possible, knowing that the political tension in Denmark has reached a boiling point, with Laertes seeking revenge for his father's death and Ophelia's madness unsettling the court. Horatio says, "How much I had to do with such a deed. I would do much to see thee again." 4.6.1718. This remark reveals Horatio's devotion to Hamlet and his desire to help his friend through the final stages of the conflict. The arrival of the pirates. The scene also briefly mentions the pirates who captured Hamlet. This event plays an important role in Hamlet's fate, as it becomes a turning point in his escape from certain death. Hamlet's dealings with the pirates will lead to the final confrontation, setting the stage for the inevitable tragedy. Analysis and notes. 1. Hamlet's resourcefulness. Hamlet's escape from the pirates shows his cleverness and resourcefulness. Even when facing certain death at the hands of Claudius' orders, Hamlet manages to turn the situation to his advantage. This marks a shift from his previous inaction and philosophical contemplation to a more pragmatic and action-oriented mindset. His ability to survive against the odds suggests that he is now ready to confront his fate and take decisive action in seeking revenge. 2. The role of fortune and fate. The pirate attack, which leads to Hamlet's escape, is a moment of chance or fortune, a recurring theme throughout the play. Hamlet's life has been shaped by a series of random events and fortuitous accidents, from the appearance of his father's ghost to his capture by pirates. This reliance on luck underscores Hamlet's view of the world as chaotic and unpredictable. Even as he seeks control over his destiny, Hamlet's fate seems to be shaped by forces beyond his control, a theme that contributes to the tragic nature of the play. 3. The shifting tone. This scene introduces a shift in tone as Hamlet's return signifies a move toward action. Throughout the play, Hamlet has been paralyzed by doubt, indecision, and the need for moral clarity. However, the letter from Hamlet to Horatio signals that Hamlet is now decided and focused on his goal. The action is beginning to unfold, and the tension in the court is about to erupt as Hamlet prepares for the final confrontation with Claudius. 4. Horatio's loyalty. Horatio's loyalty to Hamlet is evident throughout the play, and in this scene, his reaction to the letter is a testament to their strong bond. Horatio is eager to assist Hamlet in any way he can, showing his devotion and willingness to support Hamlet's decisions, even though Horatio himself is not motivated by the desire for revenge. This loyalty makes Horatio an important figure, contrasting with characters like Laertes, who are driven by rage and vengeance. 5. Foreshadowing the climax. The news of Hamlet's return foreshadows the inevitable confrontation that will take place in the final act of the play. Hamlet is now closer than ever to fulfilling his goal of avenging his father's death. However, this scene also highlights the element of fate and the unpredictable nature of the events that will unfold. Hamlet's arrival in Denmark will set into motion the final tragic chain of events that will result in the deaths of many key characters. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 6, Hamlet's escape from the pirates and his return to Denmark marks the beginning of the final act of the play. This scene signals a shift in focus from Hamlet's internal struggles to the external action that will lead to his ultimate confrontation with Claudius. Hamlet's resourcefulness and determination now set the stage for the tragic conclusion of the story. Act 4, Scene 7, Claudius and Laertes plot revenge. Summary. In this scene, Claudius and Laertes discuss their plans for revenge against Hamlet. Laertes is still furious over his father's death and his sister Ophelia's madness, and he is determined to take action. Claudius, knowing that Hamlet poses a serious threat to his rule, agrees to help Laertes in his pursuit of revenge. They hatch a plan to kill Hamlet in a way that will appear accidental, thus avoiding the suspicion that might fall on Claudius. Laertes, anger and desire for revenge. The scene opens with Laertes, still deeply grieving the deaths of his father Polonius and his sister Ophelia. He has returned from France, vowing to seek revenge for the wrongs done to his family. Laertes is filled with anger and determination, and his frustration boils over in his speech to Claudius. How came he dead? I'll not be juggled with. 4.7.4. Laertes insists that Hamlet must pay for his actions, and he is ruthless in his desire for vengeance, not allowing for any doubt or reasoning that could delay his goal. His emotions are raw, and he is willing to do anything, including treachery, to bring Hamlet to justice. Claudius, reaction and the plan to kill Hamlet. Claudius, recognizing that Laertes' anger could lead to unpredictable consequences, begins to strategize how to turn Laertes' quest for revenge into an opportunity to rid himself of Hamlet. Claudius expresses that he is also seeking revenge against Hamlet for the murder of Polonius, and he agrees to help Laertes. Claudius says, "Revenge should have no bounds. But, good Laertes, will you do this? Give me your hand upon it." 4.7.3738. Claudius offers Laertes a partnership in revenge, and they agree to set a trap for Hamlet. The two men discuss the best way to carry out the murder, and Claudius offers his own manipulative suggestion. Claudius proposes that they stage a duel between Hamlet and Laertes, where Laertes will use a poisoned sword to wound Hamlet. The poison will be strong enough to kill Hamlet instantly upon contact, and this would allow the murder to appear as part of a friendly competition, preventing suspicion from falling on Claudius. Additionally, Claudius will ensure that Hamlet drinks from a poisoned cup should the duel fail, guaranteeing that Hamlet will die one way or another. Claudius says, "I'll have the speech to give to Hamlet, and I'll play the part." 4.7.62. This highlights Claudius' manipulative nature and his willingness to use others, including Laertes, to achieve his goals. Claudius is now completely consumed with the idea of eliminating Hamlet as a threat to his throne. The news of Ophelia's death. Before the plot to kill Hamlet is finalized, Gertrude enters with shocking news: Ophelia has drowned. She describes how Ophelia's body was found floating in a stream, with flowers in her hand. Gertrude suggests that Ophelia's death might have been accidental, but her description hints that Ophelia's death may have been suicidal, driven by grief over her father's death and Hamlet's rejection. Gertrude says, "There is a willow growlant, on the brook. That shows his hoar leaves in the glassy stream. There with fantastic garlands did she come. Of crow flowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples. That liberal shepherds give a gross name." 4.7.170-174. Gertrude describes how Ophelia had been making garlands of flowers before she fell into the stream, suggesting a tragic, almost symbolic death. The scene presents Ophelia's death as a moment of despair brought on by the pressures of the recent events and her own mental collapse. Laertes, grief and anger. Upon hearing the news of Ophelia's death, Laertes is overcome with grief and rage. His already intense desire for revenge against Hamlet is now heightened, as he feels the weight of his sister's death and the injustices that have been inflicted on his family. Laertes passionately declares that Hamlet must pay for both the death of his father and the death of his sister. Laertes says, "O thou vile king, give me my father's death." 4.7.192. Laertes vows to seek vengeance not only for his father's death but also for the emotional devastation caused by Hamlet's rejection of Ophelia and the ensuing tragedy. His anger intensifies, and he seeks to ensure that Hamlet suffers for the pain he has caused. Analysis and notes. 1. The political and personal stakes of revenge. In this scene, revenge is at the heart of the action. Both Claudius and Laertes are driven by the desire to avenge the deaths of their loved ones, though their motivations differ. Claudius seeks revenge to protect his throne, while Laertes seeks revenge for personal loss and family honor. However, both characters use manipulation and deception to achieve their goals. Claudius has already orchestrated a plan to have Hamlet killed, but he now uses Laertes' anger as a means to divert attention from his own involvement. 2. Laertes as Hamlet's foil. Laertes serves as a foil to Hamlet, highlighting Hamlet's indecision and philosophical nature. While Hamlet has been slow to act and often paralyzed by thought, Laertes is decisive and willing to take swift action. This contrast further emphasizes Hamlet's internal conflict and his struggles with morality and revenge. Laertes' willingness to act without hesitation makes him a figure who is more aligned with the typical revenge tragedy hero than Hamlet, whose introspection delays his quest for vengeance. 3. The use of poison and deception. The plot to use a poisoned sword and a poisoned cup illustrates the play's recurring motif of corruption and deception. Poison is symbolic of the moral decay at the heart of the Danish court, as both Claudius and Laertes are willing to use underhanded tactics to achieve their goals. The poisoning also mirrors the earlier poisoning of King Hamlet by Claudius, reinforcing the idea that the cycle of murder and treachery is repeating itself and will continue to spiral out of control. 4. Ophelia's death as a tragic catalyst. Ophelia's death serves as a catalyst for the further escalation of the play's tragic events. It heightens the emotional stakes for both Laertes and Hamlet. Laertes, in particular, becomes consumed with anger and grief, which makes him more determined than ever to see Hamlet punished. Ophelia's tragic death also emphasizes the theme of female suffering in the play, as she is the victim of both Hamlet's rejection and her father's death. Her death contributes to the overall sense of inevitability and the fatalism that pervades the play. 5. The growing tension. As Claudius and Laertes plot Hamlet's death, the tension between the characters is palpable. Claudius' increasingly manipulative behavior, combined with Laertes' uncontrolled rage, suggests that the final confrontation between Hamlet and Laertes will be violent and devastating. The scene sets the stage for the tragic conclusion of the play, where all the tensions between revenge, betrayal, and grief will culminate in the deaths of multiple characters. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 7, the plot to kill Hamlet is set into motion, with both Claudius and Laertes determined to take revenge. The scene builds tension by highlighting Laertes' anger and grief, as well as Claudius' manipulative nature. Ophelia's death serves as a tragic turning point, intensifying Laertes' desire for vengeance and setting the stage for the final tragic conflict. Act 4, Scene 8, Hamlet's return and Laertes' wrath. Summary. In this scene, Hamlet's return to Denmark is imminent, and Claudius and Laertes continue their plot to kill him. The preparations for the duel between Hamlet and Laertes are solidified. Claudius reassures Laertes that everything is in place for the revenge, while Laertes continues to vent his anger and impatience. Meanwhile, the political and familial tensions in Denmark are reaching a boiling point as the court prepares for the final conflict. Laertes' growing anger and determination. At the opening of this scene, Laertes remains consumed with rage over the death of his father, Polonius, and the madness of his sister, Ophelia. Laertes is eager for action and is growing increasingly frustrated by the delay in avenging his father's death. He chides Claudius for not acting sooner to kill Hamlet, and the king reassures him that the plan is still intact. Laertes says, "How came he dead? I'll not be juggled with. To hell, allegiance. Vows, to the blackest devil. Conscience and grace, to the profoundest pit. I dare damnation, to this point I stand. That both the world's whole frame and my own soul. I'll make the empire of my soul." 4.8.1722. This shows the depths of Laertes' anger and determination. He is so consumed by his need for vengeance that he is willing to forsake any moral restraint or guilt. His words reflect the unwavering intensity of his emotions, signaling that he is prepared to do whatever is necessary to achieve his goal. Claudius' assurance of success. Claudius assures Laertes that the plan to kill Hamlet will succeed. He details how they will stage the duel between Laertes and Hamlet, and how Laertes' sword will be poisoned to ensure Hamlet's death. Claudius also makes a backup plan by ensuring that if Hamlet survives the duel, he will drink from a poisoned goblet. Claudius is confident that Hamlet will not leave the contest alive. Claudius says, "The point envenomed too. Where it fell, it fell." 4.8.6162. Claudius is resolute in his plan, as he has no intention of letting Hamlet escape. Claudius, calculating nature comes to the forefront here, as he seems to relish the thought of eliminating Hamlet while ensuring that no suspicion will fall on him. The return of Hamlet. Amid their plotting, news arrives that Hamlet has returned to Denmark. This interrupts their conversation, as it becomes clear that Hamlet will soon be in the vicinity of the court. Laertes is thrilled by this news, and Claudius quickly shifts his focus to ensure that the final stages of their plan are set in motion. Laertes says, "I'll work him to an exploit. I'll be his foil." 4.8.7374. Here, Laertes expresses his intent to outwit Hamlet in the duel, planning to manipulate the fight to ensure that Hamlet's death is certain. His increasing obsession with revenge and his willingness to manipulate the duel shows how far he is willing to go to achieve his goal. The competitive nature of the upcoming duel will be essential to the tragic resolution of the play. Claudius, warning and final preparations. Claudius, aware of the delicate nature of the situation, advises Laertes to remain calm and to act with poise in the coming duel. He reminds Laertes that they are plotting Hamlet's death, and that it is essential to ensure the duel looks honorable and not as a direct act of murder. Claudius' manipulative nature is evident as he constantly reminds Laertes of the importance of maintaining appearances while plotting Hamlet's demise. Claudius says, "Laertes, I'll do it. But if Hamlet is dead, his death is by your hands." 4.8.7576. Claudius ensures that Laertes will be the one to physically kill Hamlet, distancing himself from direct involvement in the act of murder. Claudius once again uses Laertes' emotions to his advantage, playing on Laertes' thirst for vengeance while maintaining a discreet appearance. The court's anxiety. As Hamlet's return grows imminent, the court is filled with anxiety. Everyone senses that something dramatic will unfold soon, and the tension in the court is palpable. While Claudius and Laertes continue to prepare for Hamlet's death, the rest of the characters, including the audience, can feel the inevitable tragedy approaching. This sets the stage for the climactic confrontation in the final scenes of the play. Analysis and notes. 1. Laertes' desire for immediate action. Laertes is contrasted with Hamlet in his desire for quick revenge. While Hamlet hesitates and contemplates the moral implications of revenge, Laertes is driven by impulse, seeking immediate satisfaction for his grief. Laertes' willingness to disregard reason and take violent action at all costs makes him a dangerous character, and it is clear that his rage will lead to devastating consequences. The play underscores how emotion-driven actions can result in unintended, tragic outcomes. 2. Claudius, manipulation and cunning. Claudius remains a figure of calculated manipulation throughout this scene. He assures Laertes that Hamlet's death is necessary and is happy to work with him to ensure that Hamlet dies without the court suspecting foul play. Claudius' duplicity is evident as he carefully arranges every detail of the duel to avoid responsibility for Hamlet's death. He is a master of manipulation and deception, carefully controlling the actions of others to secure his own survival. 3. The final duel and inevitable tragedy. The duel between Hamlet and Laertes is the pivotal moment where all the tension of the play will come to a head. Poison is again used as the means of Hamlet's destruction, symbolizing the moral decay at the heart of Denmark. Both characters are prepared to take extreme measures to achieve their goal of revenge, highlighting the play's themes of vengeance, morality, and corruption. The tragic irony of the scene lies in the fact that both Hamlet and Laertes are being manipulated into actions that will lead to their mutual destruction. 4. Ophelia's absence and Laertes' grief. Ophelia's absence from this scene is felt through Laertes' words. The pain of losing his sister, coupled with the anger over his father's death, fuels his desire for revenge. Ophelia's death serves as a catalyst for Laertes' actions, and the fact that she is not present to witness the final showdown emphasizes the tragic loss experienced by the family. Ophelia's death plays a role in the escalation of Laertes' grief, making his actions more impulsive and violent. 5. Hamlet's imminent return and the tragic conclusion. With Hamlet's return to Denmark, the final act of the play is set into motion. The court is preparing for the duel, and the audience anticipates the tragic confrontation that will bring about the play's inevitable conclusion. Hamlet's fate seems sealed, and the tragic trajectory of the play can no longer be avoided. The atmosphere of anxiety and impending doom fills the scene, heightening the tension as the play rushes toward its final moments. Concluding thoughts. In Act 4, Scene 8, Claudius and Laertes prepare for the final confrontation with Hamlet. The tension continues to build, as both Laertes' anger and Claudius' scheming are driving forces toward the inevitable tragic conclusion. This scene sets the stage for the duel, where revenge, poison, and manipulation will all play crucial roles in the destruction of Hamlet and others. Act 5, Scene 1, The Graveyard and Hamlet's reflection on mortality. Summary. In this scene, Hamlet and Horatio enter a graveyard, where they encounter two gravediggers at work. As Hamlet reflects on the nature of death and mortality, he comes across the skull of Yorick, a court jester from his childhood. This encounter leads Hamlet into a deeper contemplation about life, death, and the inevitability of mortality. The scene takes a dramatic turn when the funeral procession of Ophelia arrives, and Hamlet realizes that his beloved Ophelia has died. He confronts Laertes, and the scene sets the stage for the final tragic events of the play. The gravediggers work in Hamlet's philosophical reflection. The scene begins with two gravediggers at work, digging a grave. The dialogue between the gravediggers is filled with dark humor as they discuss the nature of death and the dead, making light of what is usually a serious and somber subject. Their exchange highlights the absurdity of life and death, with the gravediggers exhibiting a matter-of-fact attitude towards their work. Hamlet and Horatio arrive at the graveyard, and Hamlet begins to reflect deeply on the nature of death. He picks up a skull and begins to ponder the fate of the deceased, commenting on the transience of life and the inevitable decay that all must face. Hamlet's thoughts are dark and philosophical, showing his deepening existential crisis. Hamlet says, "Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now, how abhorred in my imagination it is! My gorge rises at it." 5.1.181185. This famous speech shows Hamlet's recognition of the absurdity of life, as the skull of Yorick, once full of life and humor, is now just a lifeless object. The encounter with Yorick's skull symbolizes the ultimate inequality of all people in the face of death, regardless of their status or importance in life. The funeral procession of Ophelia. As Hamlet contemplates the nature of death, a funeral procession arrives, and Hamlet inquires about who has died. He is told that it is Ophelia, and the news shocks him. Ophelia's funeral is a public event, and Hamlet realizes that she is the one who has died. He is deeply moved by the news, and his grief is evident as he contemplates the loss of his beloved. Hamlet says, "What ceremony else? That is, the very cause of my love. The cause of all my woes." 5.1.239241. This reaction is a reminder of Hamlet's deep feelings for Ophelia, and his overwhelming sense of loss. Ophelia's death becomes an emotional trigger for Hamlet, sparking both a new grief and a renewed sense of urgency in his search for meaning in the face of mortality. The confrontation between Hamlet and Laertes. As Hamlet's grief intensifies, Laertes, Ophelia's brother, emerges and shows his own deep sorrow and anger. Laertes, overcome with emotion, leaps into the grave and begins to mourn for his sister, blaming Hamlet for her death. This act of desperation leads to an outburst from Hamlet, who now recognizes the full extent of Laertes' rage and sorrow. Laertes says, "I loved Ophelia, 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum." 5.1.248250. Laertes' words emphasize the depth of his love for Ophelia, and his desire to avenge her death intensifies. Hamlet, feeling similarly wronged and full of grief, confronts Laertes, leading to a physical confrontation in the grave. This is an intense moment that highlights the shared sorrow of the two men and foreshadows the ultimate tragic events that will unfold. Analysis and notes. 1. The gravedigger scene and reflection on mortality. The gravedigger scene serves as an important philosophical moment in the play. It brings Hamlet face to face with the reality of death in a way that forces him to confront the futility of human existence. The gravedigger's casual attitude towards death contrasts with Hamlet's intense reflection, revealing the absurdity of life and the inevitability of death. This scene is rich with existential themes and adds depth to Hamlet's internal struggles. 2. Yorick's skull is a symbol of life's fleeting nature. The skull of Yorick is a powerful symbol in this scene. Yorick, once a jester full of humor and life, is now reduced to a mere skull. This serves as a metaphor for the transience of life and the ultimate equality of all people in the face of death. Hamlet's reflections on the skull force him to confront the pointlessness of life and the certainty of death. The scene challenges the audience to consider their own mortality and the impermanence of human existence. 3. Ophelia's death and its emotional impact. Ophelia's death has a profound effect on both Hamlet and Laertes. For Hamlet, it marks the culmination of his grief and emotional turmoil. His reflection on her death is tied to his growing recognition of the futility of life and the inevitable fate that awaits all. For Laertes, Ophelia's death becomes the final straw in his search for revenge, and his actions in the grave highlight the emotional and psychological toll that Hamlet's actions have had on the family. Ophelia's death also serves as a key moment of tragic irony, as her demise further complicates the central themes of the play. 4. The tragic confrontation between Hamlet and Laertes. The confrontation between Hamlet and Laertes in the grave is significant because it marks the culmination of their mutual grief. Both men are deeply affected by the deaths of their fathers and Ophelia, and their anger and frustration manifest in their physical confrontation. The graveyard setting is significant because it represents the ultimate inevitability of death, and their struggle foreshadows the ultimate tragic fate that awaits both of them. The grief-driven violence between Hamlet and Laertes is a powerful moment that underscores the play's central themes of revenge, grief, and the futility of human effort in the face of death. Concluding thoughts. In Act 5, Scene 1, Hamlet's reflections on mortality and his confrontation with Laertes set the stage for the tragic finale of the play. The graveyard scene serves as a powerful commentary on the absurdity of life and the inevitability of death, while Ophelia's death becomes the emotional catalyst for the violent confrontation between Hamlet and Laertes. This scene deepens the themes of existential despair, revenge, and the ultimate futility of human action. Act 5, Scene 2, The Duel and the Tragic End. Summary. In this final scene, the long-awaited duel between Hamlet and Laertes takes place. Claudius has arranged for the duel to be the means of Hamlet's death, ensuring that Laertes' sword is poisoned. However, the plan backfires. The duel leads to the deaths of Hamlet, Laertes, Claudius, and Gertrude, culminating in a tragic and violent resolution to the play's central conflicts. Fortinbras, the Prince of Norway, arrives to claim the throne of Denmark, bringing the play to its somber conclusion. Thanks for listening SI Audiobooks.